Greetings adventurers, this is Craddock. In this video we're going to cover leveling a wizard in Season. I'm going to provide you with a build that you can start using at about level 33. Then we're going to move on to some tips and advice for leveling a character in Season. This will apply to any class. And then we're going to move on to blood shards, all about the blood shards. What you're going to roll your blood shards on as a wizard, and then since the upcoming season is Season 14 with the DMO set, I'm going to cover a quick and simple swap that you can make to fit in the DMO4 piece. Alright, so here's the base build I typically put together after I hit about level 33, 35, thereabouts. You can see here we've transferred over to Disintegrate Convergence simply because the beam is so wide. Hits more enemies, you will kill things faster. It's also instant, meaning when you start channeling, you don't really have to wait to start dealing damage. It's quite nice. We're using, for mobility, we're using Teleport Wormhole. You get that double jump, and combination with Illusionist, you have that increased move speed. We also have Sleek Shell helping us to move. Passives you're going to want to go for, definitely want to go for Evocation, and then as you level up, switch over to Astral Presence and Illusionist to help both manage resource and get that increased movement. Evocation, of course, giving us some cooldown reduction, which is quite nice since we are using Teleport and Diamond Skin. Those are both cooldown based abilities, so this in essence becomes also helping you move around even more to be able to kill things faster. I usually just go straight for Power of the Storm on Storm Armor since it's one of the most accessible runes, and it also helps out quite a bit for reducing the cost of skills, especially since Disintegrate Convergence is a very high cost skill. This will be the one to go for. As you level up, you can opt for a swap. You can go to Scramble for even more movement, but this would require swapping out another skill. Base, I'm going to go for Force Weapon here. I'm not high enough level since I'm still level 33, but if you were level 35, I would be using Force Weapon in this skill slot. And then if you do opt for the swap for Scramble at level 43, you can swap out Magic Weapon to Conduit, and that would lower your potential damage from Magic Weapon, but give you the increased resource that you would need with the mobility at that point, So that's an option you can go for, or you could keep it as it is now. Very, very, very solid setup. The last skill slot here is basically whatever you're going to use as a skill. If you don't have any legendaries, say if you don't have the Etched Sigil yet, you would run Arcane Hydra or Lightning Hydra, whichever one you want. This one is better with AoE, but it can't hit as far as the Lightning Hydra can, and this does heavier single target. So those are your options there. And the Hydra is mainly there because it's going to let you just cast it and go. So you cast it, it'll still be fighting enemies as you're moving through the rift, which is quite nice, and you don't really have to bother casting it for another 15 seconds either, if you don't want to. So that's that choice there. Of course, when you do get an Etched Sigil, you can opt for a different skill in this skill slot, and that's why this skill slot is fairly open to swap. You could go for Energy Twister. Gale Force would probably be the strongest rune if you went Energy Twister. You could go Meteor with Thunder Crash. That would be a pretty heavy damaging attack if you do have the Etched Sigil on hand. To help kill those elites quicker, definitely help out. Here's the Gale Force, just to see how that looks like. So a little bit harder to direct that attack, but still fairly strong. And then earlier on, it is a possibility that you would have found an Unstable Scepter. An Unstable Scepter, of course, giving you a multiplier for Arcane Orb, and also letting its explosion trigger a second time. So you could go potentially put, if you have the Unstable Scepter and you've chosen to cube it or wear it, you can put Arcane Orb in here. And my preference early on is to just go unruined at this point, because the explosion, when it does hit enemies or objects, is quite large and does more AoE. So even though it's not as powerful as Obliteration, it does still do quite a bit of damage and has a fairly large AoE to it. You can go Orbit if you want as well, but this is more of a melee ability. I don't know if it's preferred at this point in the leveling process. Of course, later on, you could opt for Frozen Orb. That would be the best rune to go for, but that's later on in the leveling process. Anyway, so I hope you've enjoyed that quick, short overview of the base build that I usually run in seasons. Earlier on in the leveling process, before you hit level 30, of course you're going to be running just Ray of Frost, Cold Blood to help reduce the cost there. And then as you level up and get closer and get Teleport and get Disintegrate, Convergence, you can switch into those. So if you find yourself having trouble with resource, there are a couple of skills you can swap in. They do lower your damage or your mobility, so they aren't preferred in my opinion, but you can go to them if you absolutely need them. You can go for Diamond Skin Prism, reduces the arcane power cost of skills while it's active. Doesn't seem like it would work, but the arcane power cost reduction here is so large that it reduces over the cycle of Diamond Skin quite a lot of arcane power. So you can opt for that. That is an option. Another option would be to swap out Magic Weapon, Force Weapon entirely and go for, once you're level 50, you can opt for Arcanaut, which would give you a lot of arcane power regeneration per second. That's also a good option. There does lower your damage quite a bit though, so not my preference again. The Inspire ability, which gives you a little bit of arcane power per second, so I would definitely go with the Templar. There are a few options if you want to be more defensive or if you're playing on hardcore. I would definitely look into running Safe Passage instead of Wormhole. This would give you 25% damage reduction. It's not up all the time, but you do have the Illusionist to help keep it up more often. You could run, instead of your Storm Armor, you could run Ice Armor Crystallized. This will give you 60% extra armor with the stacking effect up to 3 times. If you don't like having to maintain the stacks and having to get hit, you can run Energy Armor instead. I would run Pinpoint Barrier earlier on, so give you a little bit of extra offense as well, which is quite nice. And then later you could opt into Force Armor or Prismatic Armor. There's also an option later on in the leveling. You definitely want to go for Deflection. Deflection gives us 4% shielding every time you attack, and this works even when you teleport. Even if teleport isn't the Calamity rune, it will still stack up a deflection stack when you teleport, which is quite nice, so to help keep up your shielding while you're on the move. And that's for hardcore or softcore. This is a very desirable skill over Force Weapon even once you get to level 55. Anyway, just a few mentionables. Passives, of course, you definitely want to maintain on hardcore Blur. So whether that's, if you need the resource, I would keep Astral Presence and instead swap out Evocation for Blur. But if you're okay on resource, you can opt to instead swap out Astral Presence and put Blur there instead. But that's just to give you some extra toughness while leveling. Alright, so let's just go through a couple of quick leveling tips in season. Immediately when you start the season, you will have saved your Challenge Rift bag, or your Challenge Rift for the season. First, create your character, then you can go into the Challenge Rift under Game Settings, Challenge Rifts, and do the Challenge Rift. Make sure you get the bag, but we're not going to use the Challenge Rift reward until later, at least for Wizard, so just be sure to keep it in your mail or your inventory, your stash, until that time, and don't use up those blood shards until we're ready. The next step is, I typically will create a game on a probably master difficulty is usually what I go after, a little bit harder of a difficulty. And what I'm looking for in this game is easy to kill bounty bosses. So something like Zoltan Cool or maybe Magda. Those are really easy to reach bounty bosses. By easy to reach, I mean they're very close to the waypoint. So it's very easy to get to them and kill them and get items earlier on in season, yellow items, this sort of thing. So just open this game. We got Zoltan Cool. If you happen to have gotten Magda, that would be another option as well. So just keep opening a game till you get one of the two, and then go and kill them and get the bounty reward to get you an early boost. Forgot to mention, before you even do that, you're going to want to go to your follower and take their weapon, equip it instead of the weapon that you start out in the season with. This is because the weapon on the follower is a little bit more average DPS. It's just a really easy, quick way to boost your DPS as you're going out into the world. Another thing you're going to immediately want to do when you enter a game in season is equip your pet, your collecting pet, your cosmetic pet. Cosmetic pet will help pick up gold for you, so, and especially at a lower level you don't have a lot of pickup radius, so having the pet on hand to just scoop up the gold for you is incredibly useful. Make sure to as well hire your follower and assign it skills as you, if you want to assign it skills, assign those skills. There are certain cases where some people don't like to assign, for example on the Templar, the charge ability, so you may skip that one, just so later on when you're going to push or speed, the Templar doesn't interrupt enemies. That's, you know, something to keep aware of on your follower options. This is especially more useful for the Enchantress, because the Enchantress has a lot of charm abilities, so you may opt to only assign missile warding, powered armor, or focus mind, for example. Another tip, I don't remember exactly what level, but around level 10 to 15, 10 to 16, somewhere in there, the average damage rings become available from the vendors. And let's just check this vendor here to see. I can't remember which one. Under trinkets, I usually do Act 2, but there are also vendors in all the other acts that sell trinkets. And we're looking for average damage rings. I'm of course a higher level now, so the vendors aren't selling those average damage rings, but when you're at that lower level, they will be selling those plus average damage rings, and that can be an easy way to quickly boost your damage early on in season. I'm going to go over the etch sigil here in a bit. That's what we're going to be spending our blood shards on, but you're going to want to save those from the Challenger's bag. Typically what I do after this point is I scale it down, at least when I'm solo. I will scale this back down to hard, at least hard difficulty. Right when I'm starting out, I typically start on normal, and I'll level from level 1 until about level 10 to 16 on normal, simply because it's a quicker clear on normal. You get, on average, more experience in my opinion, but anywhere from 10 to 16, then you can swap it into hard difficulty. And I typically level on hard on softcore for the most of the duration of the leveling process. Something to watch out for, if you usually if you don't have a nice offhand like the etch sigil to wear, you won't be using a one-hander. You'll be using, I typically equip staves, and I will craft these at the intervals at which they are craftable, so level 18, level 22, 26, etc. going on up. Just craft a new weapon every time, just to make sure you have the highest damage available in a two-hander. Is really good for the wizard in particular. You can also look at two-handed swords here too. That's another one you can craft. It does very well with the wizard as well. When you get closer into level 40, that's when you're going to want to at least have a two-handed level 70 weapon crafted. And what you're going to look for here is specifically the secondaries on the weapon. So this particular weapon, let's craft a couple here just so we get a good example of a few different varieties. And we're going to go over to the Enchantress, and I'm just going to explain this real quick. So right here, this weapon has life after each kill and plus experience. And you see here the pool here is quite large to get the level requirement reduced by, which would reduce the level requirement of this weapon from level 70 down to 40 potentially. And usually you won't get as low as 40, but you probably want to get close to 25 or so reduced level requirement at least to be able to equip this weapon earlier in the leveling process. But as you can see here, this is a dud weapon because it rolled life after each kill and plus experience. We want the weapon to, by default, roll with one of these stats: fear, stun, blind, freeze, chill, slow, immobilize, or knockback. That's because when it rolls in that manner, see we have one that has chill on hit here as a secondary, you can reroll the other secondary and it has lower amount of options. So we're just going to go ahead and roll this one and make sure you're rolling the stat that is not the chance to on hit. So we're going to reroll the life after each kill on this weapon to try and get that reduced level requirement real quick. See, because we won earlier in season, it's going to you're not going to have as many resources, so it's going to be harder, especially gold. Gold is the limiting factor here, not as much the blues. So it can get constraining if you happen to do this many times. See, I got it on the 4th roll, I believe, but if you were to re-roll a few more times, it's actually more efficient to just craft a new weapon and then restart the rolls to preserve your gold pool at that time in the season. And yeah, I happened to get lucky here with a level 28. Like I said, anything higher than, 23 to 25 would probably be okay. I'd be okay with. So just look, and that's what's something you can do to get a weapon earlier on in season. And as you can see, I can equip this at level 42, which is perfect. As far as what difficulty to level on, I typically will generally level on hard. If I get a weapon that boosts my damage a lot and I'm willing to go and able to go higher at a very quick pace still through a rift, I will increase the difficulty until I can no longer do it at that speed. I've leveled on up to Torment 1 before, so it's just whatever you can manage as far as damage is concerned. Typically, hard will be your standard, at least to start out with. As far as bounties are concerned, you can do bounties before you hit level 70 to get some of the seasonal journey out of the way before hitting max level. But if you're going to do that, I advise you to wait until you have more movement abilities such as teleport or diamond skin, sleek shell, these sort of things to help you move a lot quicker through the adventure mode when you're doing those bounties at a lower level. You can of course wait until after max level as well to increase the reward you would get from the bounties. That's also an option. So a couple of other quick general leveling tips. Rubies are your friend while leveling. If you happen to have an open socket for a weapon, you can put a ruby in there and that will give you some plus damage, which is quite nice. Better than an emerald anyway at that point in the season, since you won't have high crit chance. The ruby will be the way to go. Also for helmets, definitely the gem of choice is a ruby, because this gives you extra experience, especially before 70. Helping you get to max level quicker is always a good thing. Of course you won't have this high level of a gem, but whatever you can manage to craft in season, you can put and use those gems. Another item to look out for while you're leveling is the Leoric's Crown. This will increase the effect of any gem socketed into your helm by 100%, and if you're using a ruby, that's highly beneficial for leveling. Something to note with the Leoric's Crown is that you typically, at least the past few seasons, I've just found it while going through adventure mode in rifts, while I was leveling at low level, and so you can keep an eye out for this at low level, and if you don't happen to get one later in the leveling process, you can opt to go into story mode, any time between the levels 5 and 65, you are still able to go to story mode, kill the Skeleton King, and he will always drop a Leoric's Crown for you. So that there's always that fallback to go back on if you don't happen to find one while you're leveling up. Just make sure you do that before 65 if you want that Leoric's Crown and you haven't found one yet. And the reason I say to wait a little bit longer is usually because it's not until later that you get more movement abilities, and getting through the story mode up until Skeleton King can be kind of a waste in terms of experience and leveling, so you kind of want to avoid having to do that as much as possible. But if you do have to do it, make sure you have a lot of movement to get there quicker. Ever since the multiplier was added to Etched Sigil, it has been a strong choice to go after first thing in a season as far as rolling your blood shards on. Save the blood shards from your cache, your challenge rift bag, and save those until you get to level 33 on the wizard. That's specifically because you can only roll for the Etched Sigil when you are level 33. If you're lower than level 33, Etched Sigil isn't available in the source pool. If you are higher than 33, there are several other sources offhands that are added to the legendary pool, which dilute it so much that it's not even worth going after. Therefore, you have to roll for it at level 33. So just watch your level and take a break whenever you get there. I'm going to display to you now. I have a level 33 character, and we're going to roll for some Etched Sigil. We're going to roll some sources here to see if we get it. It's an average of about 70%, a little bit more than 70% that you will get the Etched Sigil in season at this point, so it's definitely, oh, there we go, first one, got an Etched Sigil. I'm just going to roll some more blood shards just to see if we get any more. The only other source in the pool at this time is a Winter's Flurry. So there is that. I think that's enough. So we got one out of the 500 or so blood shards that I've rolled here. So there you have it. Etched Sigil gives you a huge multiplier up front, and you're able to run many options as far as leveling after that point. So everything up to this point has been not looking at the seasonal set bonus. Season 14 bringing in with the Hadrig's Gift the DMO set, Delcier's Magnum Opus, the 4-piece, of course giving us a hefty damage reduction bonus, currently 60%, so you're going to want to include slow time in the build at that point. My advice is to swap out either Diamond Skin or Magic Weapon, either giving up that extra mobility and shielding, or you could give up the damage and utility that Magic Weapon would provide for the slow time. And then as far as the rune goes, I tend to prefer either Exhaustion or Time Warp earlier on, simply because Point of No Return is useful for the stun, but it can get annoying at times if it stuns enemies out of place and you've got an ability that requires range or something like that. But and then Stretch Time is also an option, but it's harder earlier on to maintain the bubbles when you have lower cooldown and such. Positioning requires you to be in the bubble for the increased attack speed of this rune, and it just gets kind of annoying, especially earlier on when you don't even have the 6-piece to try and maintain that. So my advice, just go for Exhaustion or Time Warp if you want higher defense or offense. Alright, I want to thank you for watching this video. Keep an eye out for my next upcoming video, because that video will cover a few builds that you can use once you get your DMO 6-piece as a wizard. So a couple of starter builds coming your way, so stay tuned to my channel. Thank you very much.